What's up out there? Happy Halloween! I have finished my Halloween horror movie marathon and am back with the results for it just in time for Halloween. It ended up taking a little bit less time than I expected. I actually got done last weekend. So I've just kind of sat on things for a little bit and just digested it, and I really enjoyed this year. This is probably the best year that I've had, and it's not because I've had an incredible quality of movies, it's because everything was even this year. Normally I have a lot of really low lows and really high highs, and the middle seems a little jagged, let's say that. This year, everything was very good. My rating system, I used the Letterboxd website to rate everything, and they have 5 stars. So for me, a 3-star movie is right in the middle. And then if it's 3.5 stars, it's better than average. 2.5 is worse than average, and so on. So I didn't have any 5-star movies this year, but I didn't have any half-star or 1-star movies either. So it was a very good year, and I attribute that to a couple of things. Number one, this is, I think, the 9th list that I've done for this marathon. So I've done various lists in the past. Like sometimes I'll do one that's themed, like a serial killer theme or the history of horror or something like that. But I've migrated over to a guy on Letterboxd named Cinemonster generates this list every year. It's like a treasure hunt, and I'm showing it on the rules are on the screen here if you want to take a look at it. So basically you have to have so many different countries, so many different decades, particular directors, maybe certain actors. That's usually how it goes every year. So instead of going from a themed list, I ended up moving over to this list, which is a catered list, and it's more of a treasure hunt, and I enjoy this. This is more fun. So this is how I end up running every year now. And in the past, I've done both lists, and I've moved over to this one, basically. So anyway, I started following this list several years ago, and as I worked this in, I learned some things. Like, I don't want to do a series. I did the whole Saw series one year, and that sucked. I like the Saw movies, but so much of that, and it gets to be a slog because you go one day and then the next day and then the next day, and all you have to look forward to is another Saw movie. And there was like 6 or 7 of them at the time. I think it was the year Jigsaw came out that I did that. And that's why I put that in the marathon. I did like a serial killer theme, and because of that, it just wore on too much. So that was one thing that sucked. I've learned not to put series in. In fact, I don't put more than 1 or 2 of a franchise together because it just gets to be too much. And then the other thing that I attribute this to is I started working up a list of potential movies. So normally in years past, you can go in and put movies in your watch list on Letterboxd. And I got 1,000 movies on there. But those are movies that I thought, yeah, these would be cool to watch someday. Click it on the watch list. And you can separate by horror and just, separate that genre out completely and all that. And it's great. But I actually started making a list that when I read somebody's review through the year, or I watch something on YouTube or see a trailer or whatever, and I thought, that looks cool, I'll put that on my list for the potential movies for the yearly marathon. And I started doing that, and this is the first year that I did start doing that last year. This is the first year that I actually drew from that list. And it worked out really well. And throughout the year, I'll buy a few movies here and there. And one of the things that I did this year was try to incorporate more newer films and more films that I had bought but had not watched. So there's quite a few that I've either been meaning to see or have bought and haven't watched yet, or that were new and I wanted to see. So even though I fit a lot of the criteria, like I have to have 8 different decades and stuff like that, I filled all that out and then filled the rest of the list in with stuff that I wanted to watch over time. So anyway, let's dive into the list. So the first movie I watched was Lake of the Dead. This is a Norwegian film from 1958. This was a lot like a Scooby-Doo episode. Now, I would not normally recommend a black and white subtitled horror movie or black and white subtitled any movie to anybody, really, because it's a particular taste that you have to acquire. It's not something you can really just jump into. But if you like Scooby-Doo and, the pull the mask off of the villain at the end kind of thing, this really reminded me of a Scooby-Doo episode. And that's really why I wanted to bring the attention to Lake of the Dead. I watched The Girl Who Knew Too Much. This is a Mario Bava film. It was okay. Didn't really stand out to me enough, but I enjoyed it. This one here, Billy the Kid versus Dracula. This is a 60s movie, and 60s horror is a little odd. Like, I love 50s horror because it's kind of sci-fi and big monster-esque. And then 70s horror was when you start getting stuff like The Exorcist and things like that. But the 60s is kind of a weird, I don't really know of a whole lot of good films from the 60s. Like you've got Psycho and things like that. But there's a lot of weird, kind of bad stuff from the 60s. It was when they were transitioning into maybe a little bit more gore, and they kind of just went B-level because you couldn't really get too good with it or something. I don't know. It's kind of an odd era. So this is also, this movie here, Billy the Kid versus Dracula, is a cowboy movie, and I watched that because I've watched a lot of watched a lot of cowboy movies earlier in the year. And I picked this one because you had to pick the worst Dracula movie. And this was actually kind of fun. This is not a good movie, but it had cowboy action, so you get fist fights and shoot 'em ups and stuff like that. And then you get Dracula running around draining people's blood and things like that. It was kind of a fun movie. It was definitely a bad movie. So you got the bad on the string kind of stuff like that. And I think cowboy movies and stuff were really big in like the 50s. So into the 60s maybe. So you get some of that here. And like I said, the horror is kind of weird and bad, but it was fun. This was a fun movie. Next up was Tales from the Crypt. This one, I needed a Peter Cushing film and one from the Amicus studio. I was also curious about this one. This was on my list, my potential list, because I wasn't sure if this was exactly tied into the Tales from the Crypt. Now, I grew up with Tales from the Crypt on HBO, and this kind of is that, but much different. Like the Tales from the Crypt I grew up on with Crypt Keeper and all that was more of a comedy horror type thing. This one was more of a drama horror kind of deal, but I loved it. There was little segments that were all different, and there was an overall theme to it. Very good movie. I enjoyed this one a lot. I needed a Hitchcock film, so I watched Frenzy. This was pretty good. This one you see from the eyes of the killer. Well, you see both sides. You see the good guy and you see the bad guy. Normally you don't know who the killer is. This one you know everything the whole time. You see all sides of the story. And it was good. I like this a lot. I see why a lot of people like, I haven't watched a lot of Hitchcock films. I've seen like The Birds and North by Northwest and stuff like that, but I haven't really seen a lot other of his movies. So it was kind of cool to watch this one. Next up was Shockwaves. I need another Peter Cushing film. Nazi zombies, you can't go wrong. It's a bad B movie, but it's fun. I enjoyed it. Brian De Palma's The Fury was the next one I watched. This one was more like Carrie. This was a lot like Carrie, but with two people instead of just one chick at the high school prom or whatever. But this one wasn't a horror until the very end, like the last 10 minutes. It's like a 2-hour movie, and then you get to the last 10 minutes, and then it's just balls out crazy horror, psychokinesis and all that stuff. But throughout, it was more drama. So it was a good movie, but not really in the horror. Human Lanterns, this was good. Hong Kong film from the 80s. If you're used to, I can't remember the name of the studio, but they make Five Elements Ninjas and stuff like that. I think it's that same group. They make a lot of kung fu movies, that kind of stuff. And if you're into that kind of thing, this was a movie about some dude that was basically skinning people and making them into lanterns and stuff. But it's more of a kung fu movie. So this was fun in a lot of ways. It was kind of gory and violent. I loved it. This was a good movie. And I bought this one a few years ago, and I've been sitting on it. I just haven't quite got it in, so I made it work into this year's marathon. Next up was Night of the Comet from the 80s. I needed one that was post-apocalyptic from the year that I turned 10, so I watched this one from 1984. This was a good movie. I can't believe it's taken me so long to watch this. This was great. Next up was Invaders from Mars. I needed a Tobe Hooper film. I am quickly running out of Tobe Hooper films to watch for the first time. He's got a few left, but not very many. And this is one of the new ones, or one of the ones that I hadn't seen before. There's an original film from the 50s, and I love 50s sci-fi movies. They have a really cool aesthetic and everything. Like, it was when things were campy and just fun. I loved this. This was a remake of that, so it was kind of that 50s style, but made in the 80s. I loved it, had a good time with it, and it's one of the ones that once I do run out of Hooper films to watch, this will be in rotation with Texas Chainsaw and the Carnival one. I can't think of the name of it. But I had a good time with this one. So Creepazoids, it was a swap out. I needed another post-apocalyptic movie. This one sucked. I don't recommend it. It was not bad for the first, say, 2/3 of it, but the final third just drug on too long and it kind of sucked. Edge of the Axe, I needed a film with an X in the name, so that I picked this one. It's a Spanish film, but everybody spoke English. I expected subtitles out of it, and I don't know. But anyway, the movie was kind of fun. I didn't like the ending to it because it had a weird twist to it that I didn't agree with. Next up, Lair of the White Worm. This movie was badass. I love this. This was one of the highlights of this whole marathon. I enjoyed this a lot, and it is a batshit crazy movie. I loved every second of it. I need to buy this and rewatch it down the road because I loved it. Next up, Grave Robbers. I needed one with Something is Underground. This is a Mexican film that was available on Shudder, and I'd seen it pop up earlier in the year, and I thought that looks cool. This was really good. I love mummy movies and, pyramids and curses and stuff like that. This is kind of like that, but it's more of a Catholic thing in a Mexican cemetery or whatever. And I loved it. This was great. I shouldn't say great. This was a really fun movie, and it was a lot like a mummy movie, but more of a zombie kind of thing, if that makes sense. It had a lot of similarities to a mummy movie with the crypt and everything, so I had a good time with this one. I needed a Robert Englund film, so I picked Urban Legend. For whatever reason, I've never actually watched any of the Urban Legend movies, which I changed that this year. I ended up watching all three because once I got done with the marathon, I watched Bloody Mary and then I watched the other one, which sucked. But the first two Urban Legends are really good. I enjoyed those. Next up, I needed a Wes Craven film, and I'm kind of running out of stuff to watch from him because I've watched almost all his stuff too. But I had never watched Redeye before, or if I had, it was so long ago, I don't remember. But this was more thriller and kind of didn't fit at all. But and then I found some free options that I could have watched on other stuff that I either have on Amazon Prime or Tubi or something, and I ended up sticking with this because I had already rented it, so moved on with it. Then Inland Empire is a movie I'd been meaning to check out. It's a David Lynch film. This movie is 3 hours long. Like, I sat down to watch it, and I was like, oh my God, this is 3 hours. I had already rented it. I could have swapped out to something else and this is like during the week, and I really wasn't prepared for a 3-hour film. And it's a French film, so it starts off with subtitles, but then it's in English. It's got some, I can't remember who's in it, but big name actors. It was so long. It was a good film. I enjoyed it. I don't think I'd ever watch it again. It's basically about some actress's career as it kind of takes a nosedive, and you see from her perspective just going bananas and things going crazy. It was good. Like I said, I like this a lot, but man, it was very long. Next up, I needed a Clive Barker story, something based on a Clive Barker story, and I picked this movie Dread from 2009. Now, I enjoyed, what's the words for this? This was a good film. I thought this was well done. This is one of the better Clive Barker movies. Like, I love Hellraiser, Midnight Meat Train. I do not like Lord of Illusions. I've read a couple of his books, and like Magic is really just weird. Like, it's just odd. But Dread, this was a good movie. It was well done, but I don't really ever want to see it in because it's kind of a mean movie. It's kind of just more of about somebody that is just a complete disaster of a human being that you just watch destroy other people's lives. And while I can respect the way this was done, it's not fun. You know what I mean? It's not a fun horror movie. So I was like, whatever. Don't need, I enjoyed it, but I'm not going to watch it again. Let's say that. Next up is The Ranger. Now, this one I had seen available on Shudder, and I've been meaning to watch it. I just never got around to it. But I needed an LGBTQ plus connected film, and this one has a couple of gay punk rocker people in it. Good movie. The Ranger, the dude that plays the Ranger and the girl that plays the main chick, they kind of go head to head as a big fight. The dude that played the Ranger was awesome. I loved this movie. This was fun. There was a lot of good fun kills in it, as opposed to the last movie I talked about. There was a lot of fun to it, and it was just entertaining. So I had a good time with this one. Next up was Suspiria. This is the remake from 2018 that Amazon Prime sponsored. I needed a satanic / devil-centered film, and this one came up in my research, came up as a list. I would not consider this that. This was more maybe eldritch horror or something. And a large part of this is kind of a drama with some weird stuff going on. But then when things go bananas, they really go bananas. Like I said, I don't think this necessarily fit the criteria that I picked it for, but it was a good movie. This would be more of a witch movie or more of an eldritch, maybe horror movie kind of thing. Now, I have watched the original Suspiria way back in 2015, I think, but it was so long ago, I really don't remember it. I need to revisit that. So I enjoyed this one. This is a good movie, but this was another long one. Next up was Synchronic. Now, I needed a Moorhead and Benson film, and I had bought this movie a while back. They make The Endless and Spring, and there's another one that I really like from them. They're big on, say, cosmic horror and stuff like that, and this starts off kind of as a horror movie, but then ends up more as a drama thriller kind of thing, and I enjoyed it. I had a good time with it, but I don't know that it fit the list for the directors, which is fine, but it did not necessarily fit as a horror movie. I wished it would have continued on the way it started. Let's say that. Next up was Antebellum. This is a movie I bought several years ago. Well, a couple years ago now. And this was an extra film I just threw on the list. I'd been meaning to watch it for a while. I heard good things about it. I liked this, but I don't think this was a horror movie. This was more of a thriller, in my opinion. And like if I look on Letterboxd, it says it's a horror movie. I think that's all it lists is like it's a horror movie, which I guess I understand. But from my perspective, this was more thriller. This is a lot like an M. Night Shyamalan movie without actually being one of his movies. And I enjoyed this. I thought this was really good. There's a big twist to it. I loved how everything was set up. Like this was a really good movie. It felt off being in a horror movie marathon. So that was Antebellum. Next up was Becky. Now this was one I had seen good things about. And I took a chance on. I bought this earlier in the year for $5. It was on sale on Vudu. I grabbed it, and I thought I'm going to buy this for the marathon and try to figure out how to fit it in. This was a fun movie. So it's got Kevin James in it from King of Queens and Lulu Williams in it. This was great. Them two fighting each other, and it was played seriously, like it wasn't real campy or anything. I thought it was good. I loved it, and I've since watched The Wrath of Becky that came out later. Since I got done with the marathon, I watched that also. Both movies were great. I loved them. I had a great time watching them. They're just fun, mean and bloody. And I just loved it. Next up was May the Devil Take You 2. This was actually a sequel to May the Devil Take You, which I've never seen, but this one was on Shudder. This one was more satanic and devil-centered than the other one I talked about. This was an Indonesian film. Now, this felt very similar to The Queen of Black Magic, which was another Indonesian film. Both of them take place in like an orphanage, but this one, and I thought this one was the sequel to that one because they both had a very similar vibe to them. But this was a sequel to a different film, and so I can't watch May the Devil Take You, so I'm going to pretend that The Queen of Black Magic was the sequel, or was the original, and this was the sequel. They just feel good together, I guess. So anyway, I enjoyed this one. This one was really creepy. Like there was stuff going on in the background the whole time, and it's like, holy shit, this one was nasty, and it was, I loved it. Next up was The Outwaters. I was kind of looking forward to this one. I saw a lot of people talking about how crappy this movie was, and it was shit. This movie sucked. The poster's really good, but the movie itself is some people that go out in the desert with cameras and flashlights, and that's kind of it. You see a lot of filming at night, and they shine a spotlight on like a tent, and everything else on the screen is black, and you just don't see anything. There's maybe some creepy sounds, and that's kind of it. I ended up fast forwarding through this. This was way too long, way too boring, and way too, I don't know. It tried to be a bad Blair Witch, and it really was a bad Blair Witch. So, I don't know. Next up, Spirit Halloween, the movie. We got one of those things, the Spirit Halloween shop that comes around. I love buying stuff from them. I figured this movie would suck, but it might be kind of fun, and it turned out it was. I enjoyed this. It's a bad movie. But I wanted to put this one in last year's marathon, but I couldn't work it in. I didn't see where I could fit it, so I fit it into this year's. It was a fun movie. I don't know. It was bad. I don't necessarily recommend it, but it was one that I could see myself watching from time to time Just, it has that good Halloween vibe. Let's just say that. Next up was kind of a disappointment. This is Talk to Me from 2022. This is an Australian film, and I was really looking forward to this one, but it just didn't quite do it for me. I enjoyed it. I appreciated the movie. It was exactly as described, but for some reason, this one just didn't quite land where I thought it was going to. The next one, which is Cobweb, did. Now, this one I thought looked awesome. I gave this one 4 stars. This one I thought looked awesome, and this one really lived up to the not only the trailer, but this one was just badass. This one was creepy, and there's a lot of times when you think it's going to go one direction, and it goes the other direction. I loved it. This was fun. Next up, we have Renfield. This one, I needed a Bram Stoker-related film. I was like, all right, Renfield's coming out. It came up for sale. I picked it up. Then I find out it's on Amazon Prime, so I could have just watched it for free. But you never know when you're setting up the list in August what's going to come out in October. But this was fun. I love this. Great time. It was a good movie. Next up is The Pope's Exorcist. Now, this one was Satan/Devil Center, like straight up. I should have watched this movie last. This movie was every bit of The Exorcist and Constantine. If you like both of those movies and you want to see like what that would look like combined, I thought this was excellent. There's a lot of action. There's a lot of weird devil stuff going on. Like, this was probably the highlight of it. The highlight of the marathon, just because of the amount of, this would have been a good closer. Let's say that. I won't say it's a highlight because there was a lot better films, but this one was so much fun and so many crazy things happened throughout. I should have ended it with this one. I did not, because I didn't want to put Renfield and the Last Voyage of the Demeter together since they were both Dracula related. And in fact, I should have watched the Demeter first and then Renfield and then the Pope's Exorcist. I know that gets it out of chronological. Well, I guess it doesn't get out of chronological order. They're all 2023. So that's how I should have watched it, but I didn't. So I ended up on the Last Voyage of the Demeter, and this movie was good. It was very long. It was very slow, and I should have watched it the night before, because when I watched this, it was kind of like, yawn, and what time is it, you know? And not that this wasn't a bad movie. It was just very slow. So it was kind of I don't know. I wished I'd have switched things around. I enjoyed this movie, but it was slow, and the ending was, I don't know. I pictured things a little differently, but I will say some of the things that I thought they were going to do, they did not do, and they went a different direction. So I was happy with that. Then there was 3 movies that was extra credit. The Zodiac Killer, which it was okay. 10 Rillington Place. This is about a serial killer from, I can't remember the guy's name, something Christie, from the UK in like the 50s or whatever. This was an excellent movie. I wished I would have watched this during my serial killer marathon, because this would have fit better there. Same with Zodiac Killer. These would have been better off in that year that I did that theme. And then the last one is this Shaky Shivers movie. I don't know why this one got picked. It's not like the other 2 were serial killer movies. This one was something different. This movie straight up sucked. There was 2 main girls in it, and they just were annoying the entire time. The best parts of this movie was when they didn't talk, and I just ended up looking at my phone, getting up and doing other things. Like, this movie kind of sucked, and I just didn't enjoy it. I paid like $6 or $7 for a rental, and I feel ripped off on it. It was just a bad movie. But overall, I had a really great year. I had a lot of fun with this one. This was definitely the most even-keeled year that I've had, with probably the best overall experience. So happy Halloween. If you guys are doing your own marathon, I hope you're enjoying it. Or if you're watching horror movies for the season, it is that time of year. Enjoy it. And that will do it for this video. We will catch you on the next one. Take care.